May 7th, 2017, Carlisle, Ohio. 18-year-old varsity cheerleader Brooke Skylar Richardson gave birth at home and buried her newborn daughter in the backyard of her parents' house. 2 months later, she described what had happened to her doctor, who informed police. Richardson was ultimately charged with aggravated murder, child endangerment, involuntary manslaughter, and abuse of a corpse. Today, we look back into this case and deep dive into the investigation, the testimony, and the verdict. Ultimately, we ask the question, was justice served in this case? Today, we find out together. This is BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded Throwback, Ohio versus Richardson. And it begins right now. Good early afternoon, good late morning, everyone. Welcome back to this fourth installment of Ohio versus Richardson and BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded Throwback. So good to have you here. I'm Ernest Bethea, the last outlaw. When we last left you, Lieutenant John Fain was on the witness stand and he brought the interrogation video with him, which covered everything from top to bottom, but also know that Lieutenant John Fain will be back on the witness stand as a recall witness. We'll see him later on as we go through this series. Right now, we're going to take you to forensic pathologist Dr. Susan Brown and her testimony. But as always, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. I want to thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting to this edition of BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded Throwback. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm almost willing to guess Baby Kisses is in the house. Yep. How you doing? Oh my goodness! It's almost like I can time when she arrives in the chat. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you smash that like button. It helps out. It helps the channel out. If you want to join the open panel, which is open always, you can click on this link. You can copy it, put it in a new browser tab or window. I would love to hear your comments. And I know it's only Baby Kisses in chat, but if there's anyone who joins in after, just remember, everything we comment on, every statement we make, all of our views are just that. It's speculation, it's deduction, it's theory, it's opinion. It's not considered evidence or fact. Also, for those joining in the chat, that sure. Your opinions are welcome here. Attacks against other chatters, not so much. If you don't like an opinion, all you got to do is click on the three dots next to that person's name, click block, and you're done with it. You don't have to hear from that person. And please, I'm begging you, hold off on the racism, the homophobia, and all the attacks. And please, no politics or religion talk. We try to keep that. We try to keep that to a low roar as well. All right. Now that we got that part of the house cleaned up, before I even start, here's our copyright disclaimer. The version I'm using for YouTube and Talk and Streamlabs Talk Studio. Okay, now that I'm covered, here's also a trigger warning. Everything, as always, anything you may see or hear could be triggering to your mental health. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. When I say that, I mean if you can't take this, I suggest you do not watch it, do not listen to it, do not let you. I don't want it to affect you. And I want to give credit and a shout out to Court TV, your front row seat to justice, for their coverage of this case. Hey, so now that we got that straightened out, all right, we are going to set up the screen, and we are going to hear from Dr. Susan Brown, the forensic pathologist in this case.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Was everybody able to follow my instructions and admonitions over our break last night? All right, we are going to resume our testimony this morning. We left off yesterday with Mr. Fain's testimony because of some scheduling issues. We are going to interrupt his testimony, and we are going to have some other witnesses testify. The fact that some of these witnesses are being taken out of order or we're pausing, that is of no concern to you in how the evidence is presented. Mr. Knippen, Ms. Kraft, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Dr. Susan Brown.
I do.
You may be seated.
Okay.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, can you please state your full name for the record, spelling your last?
Susan Brown, B-R-O-W-N.
And just for point of clarification, at the time that you became involved in this case, were you known as Dr. Susan Allen?
Yes, I was.
Doctor, where are you employed?
The Montgomery County Coroner's Office in Dayton.
And in what capacity?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
And what is your business address?
West 3rd Street,
And is that in Dayton, Ohio?
Dayton, Ohio.
Thank you. And how long have you been so employed, Doctor?
12 years.
As a forensic pathologist, can you please explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your duties and responsibilities are at the Montgomery County Coroner's Office?
I perform autopsies to determine cause and manner of death.
And is that what a forensic pathologist does?
Yes.
Can you explain to them what cause and manner of death is?
Cause of death is any type of injury or natural disease that leads to death. And manner of death is how that cause of death came about. You have 5 choices on a manner of death: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined.
Thank you, Doctor. Can you please detail for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury your educational and medical background that qualifies you for your current position?
I have a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Cincinnati. I went on to medical school at Ohio University, did a residency in pathology at Ball Memorial Hospital in Muncie, Indiana, and then did additional training in forensic pathology, did a fellowship in forensic pathology at the Montgomery County Coroner's Office, which is where I'm currently employed.
Thank you, Doctor. And are you currently licensed?
Yes.
In which states?
Ohio and Indiana.
And are you board certified?
Yes, I am.
And in what areas?
Anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, hematopathology, and forensic pathology.
Thank you, Doctor. Are you a member of any professional organizations?
I'm a member of NAME, the National Association of Medical Examiners.
Doctor, in the course of your career, approximately how many autopsies have you performed?
Several thousand.
And have you previously testified, and has your testimony been accepted as expert?
Yes.
In which counties?
Montgomery County, here in Warren County, Preble County, Butler County, Greene County, Clark County.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Doctor, showing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 95 for purposes of identification. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And can you please tell us what that is?
It's my resume.
And does that resume or curriculum vitae detail all of your relevant training and experience as it relates to your current position?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would offer Dr. Susan Brown as an expert in the area of forensic pathology.
Does the defense wish to conduct any examination as to voir dire of the witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. Doctor, I'd like to direct your attention to July 15th and July 28th of 2017. Were you so employed by the Montgomery County Coroner's Office on those dates?
Yes.
And same duties and responsibilities that you just detailed?
Yes.
And just to be clear, you are an employee of the Montgomery County Coroner's Office, correct?
Correct.
You're not an employee of the prosecutor's office?
Correct.
And you have not been paid or retained by our office to come to this trial and testify?
No.
The opinion that you offer today, would that be the same opinion that you would offer whether you're subpoenaed by the state or the defense?
Yes.
Thank you. Doctor, on those dates, did you have occasion to conduct an autopsy on skeletal remains that had been identified to you as those of baby Richardson?
Yes.
And at that time, when you first received her body, or her skeletal remains, if you will, what information did you have, if any, regarding how her remains came to be in your custody?
I had been given information from the scene investigation, which was from the Warren County Coroner's Office.
And what information was that?
They told our office that the remains of this baby, they were recovered from a backyard burial.
And doctor, during the course of your autopsy or your examination, did you at a later point receive additional information, additional collateral information?
Yes.
And what other sources of information did you receive during the course of your examination and or autopsy?
I received information from the police interview of the defendant.
And would that be both interviews, excuse me, on July 14th and July 20th?
Yes.
And doctor, is that common practice in your role as the forensic pathologist to receive collateral information?
Yes.
Doctor, where did you conduct the autopsy in this case?
In Dayton at the Montgomery County Coroner's Office.
And who all was present?
Morgue technicians and a photographer, also employees of the Montgomery County Coroner's Office.
And that was going to lead into my next question. Was there equipment present to allow you to photograph or have somebody photograph the autopsy as it was performed?
Yes.
And is that also a routine part of an autopsy?
Yes.
Doctor, if you could, can you please explain the manner in which you would typically perform an autopsy?
The first thing that we do is to take pictures to show how the decedent arrived at our facility. And then we begin to do an external examination so that we look at the outside of the body for any type of signs of natural disease or injury. And then we do an internal exam where we actually remove all of the organs and examine all of the organs for the same thing, for any kind of natural disease or injury. And during the entire process, take pictures to show any findings that we have.
Doctor, did you follow that same procedure in this case?
As much as I could.
And can you please explain what you mean by that?
Well, in this particular case, I received skeletal remains or just bones with only a small amount of soft tissue, fatty tissue attached, and no internal organs. So there really was no internal exam because there were no internal organs.
So doctor, just to be clear, when you talk about in your typical procedure doing an internal examination, was there any ability to do an internal examination on the remains of baby Richardson?
No.
And would it be fair to say then that in this particular autopsy, your examination was limited to what you had, which was the skeletal remains?
Correct.
So there was an external examination and photographs?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, doctor, you mentioned photographs were taken in this case as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
And would the viewing of those photographs materially assist you with your testimony today?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Doctor, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 97 through 110 and ask you to take a look at those, please. Do you recognize those photographs?
Yes.
And are those the photographs that were taken of the autopsy performed on baby Richardson?
Yes.
And do those photographs clearly and accurately depict the autopsy as it was performed in your crime lab on that day?
Yes.
Now, doctor, before we start going through these photographs, just to lay a little background here, did you were aware that there were two different excavation dates in this case?
Yes.
And I previously asked you if your autopsy was performed on two dates, July 15th and July 28th.
Yes.
And did that correspond to the two different excavation dates?
Yes.
So how did that work for you? You received the initial set of remains that came in from the first excavation, correct?
Yes. So on July 14th, I received the first recovery of remains, did my exam the following day, and then on July 20th, we received a second set, and then I did my second exam on July 28th.
Thank you, doctor. Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 97 for purposes of identification. Doctor, if you will, can you tell us what is depicted in this photograph?
This picture shows what we received during the first recovery. So we have 3 bags, in addition to some loose remains that all arrived in a body bag.
And if you need to, you can use the screen up there. the bones or remains that we see right in the center of that picture, were those the loose bones that came in that you just
Yes.
referred to from the body bag?
Yes.
Is that just bones? Is there anything mixed in? What are we seeing there?
We see a collection of bones with some dirt and a little bit of fatty, soft tissue attached.
Doctor, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 98 for purposes of identification. Can you please tell us what is depicted in that photograph?
So this is a closer look at the loose bones and a little soft tissue and dirt that we received.
And is that a close-up of that center section that we saw in the first photograph?
Yes.
And this is, just to be clear, what you have from the first excavation at this point, correct?
Yes.
Doctor, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 99 for purposes of identification. And I believe I'm going to move the photograph for you a little bit. That is the top of the photograph, and because of the positioning of the photograph, you have to move it up a little. But what is depicted in that photograph, Doctor?
So here we're looking at, after I started to go through some of those, the dirt and remains that I received, these are ribs and a portion of the vertebral column, the bony structure that protects your spinal cord. So here we're looking at ribs. And you can see that some of the ribs have darkening on the ends of them.
Thank you, Doctor. Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 100 for purposes of identification. What is depicted in this photograph, Doctor?
So here we're looking at one of the bags that I received during the first recovery. And in this bag, there are bones of the skull.
And Doctor, we've had a little bit of testimony, but if you will, is it common at this age for the skull to be in so many pieces, if you will?
It is. So as an adult, many of these bones are all fused to form one structure, but an infant has not reached that maturity yet. So many of the bones, not only in the skull, but throughout the body, have not fused yet, so may not look like an adult bone would look.
And when you say as an infant, at one day of life, is this how you would expect the bones of an infant to look?
Yes.
Doctor, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 101 for purposes of identification. Can you please tell us what is depicted in this photograph?
So here we see the second bag that we had received during that first recovery. And in the second bag, the bag contained dirt along with strands of hair.
Now I'm going to mess up your circle. But the strands of hair that you're referring to were located in that clump of dirt?
Yes.
And is that the sample that was ultimately forwarded to serology for analysis for DNA and gender?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 102 for purposes of identification. Can you please tell us what is depicted in that photograph?
So here we have the third bag that was received during that first recovery. And in this bag, we have a collection of dirt. And within that dirt is some fragments of fatty type soft tissue and numerous bones.
How did you go about trying to sift through that, if you will, to see if there was anything of evidentiary value in that pile of dirt?
Just with my hands.
Now, doctor, after you have sifted through the dirt and everything else, and I believe you indicated in State's Exhibit 98, that's what you are starting out with, correct?
Yes.
Are you making attempts to try and inventory this and determine what, if anything, you have?
I did not do an inventory. I waited for an anthropologist to come and do the inventory. I simply started going through what we had in order to recover as many bones as I could from all of the dirt.
And doctor, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 103 for purposes of identification. When you start sifting through that pile, is this what you were able to pull out?
Yes, so this is initially what I had recovered on my first look through all of the dirt. And here we can see that there are numerous ribs and clavicles or collarbones, as well as some vertebral bones, pelvis, a little bit of fatty type soft tissue, some long bones, skull bones.
Doctor, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 104 for purposes of identification.
Doctor, if you click the lower left, it will clear everything at one time.
Thank you.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 104 for purposes of identification. Doctor, can you tell us what we're looking at in this photograph?
So here we're looking at the skull bones. There are two parietal bones, a right and left parietal bone, and these are the bones that sit right on top of your head. And then there is an occipital bone that sits right at the back of your head. And so here we have the parietal bones, the left, the right, and here is the occipital bone.
Doctor, are there in this picture any fractures depicted?
Yes, there are 3 fractures on both the right and the left parietal bones.
And I'm going to show you another picture, but from a different view. State's Exhibit 105 for purposes of identification. What are we looking at in that photograph, doctor?
So these are the same bones that we saw in the last picture, except we have now flipped them over. So we're looking at the other side, the side that would be in contact with your brain, so the inside of the bones.
And are those fracture sites better depicted when the bones are flipped?
Yes.
And can you please identify those for us?
So again, this is the left and the right parietal bones. We have a puncture type fracture on the left, there's a fracture right here and a fracture here. On the right, we have 1, 2, and this one is a little difficult to see. It's bent in, so it's sort of in the same plane with the picture and difficult to see from this angle.
Now, doctor, you are aware that baby Richardson's body was in the ground for over 2 months, correct?
Yes.
Are you able to offer any opinion as to whether those fractures are pre or post-mortem?
I don't know.
And just so everybody is clear, what is pre-mortem and what is post-mortem, doctor?
So pre-mortem meaning that it occurred before death, and post-mortem after death.
Thank you, doctor. Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 106 for purposes of identification. Doctor, can you please tell us what is depicted in that photograph?
So here we're looking at the nearly complete set of infant remains that were recovered. We have skull bones, the frontal bones, facial bones, including the jaws, the maxilla, the mandible, so the upper and lower jaws, the vertebral bones, ribs on either side of those, the upper extremities, so the long bones of both arms, the ribs, the pelvis, and the femurs, or the long bones in your thighs, and also some bones of both hands.
Is there anything at this point that is obviously missing?
There are a couple of things missing. A few ribs, a couple of vertebral bones, and the lower leg bones, the tibia and fibula, 2 lower leg bones on either side, and the feet and ankles.
Doctor, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 107 for purposes of identification. Can you tell us what is depicted in that photograph?
So this is an envelope that I received during the second recovery. And this envelope is from the previous burial site in the backyard where they found the first set of remains.
And just to be clear, it was your understanding they went back out a second time and additional bones were located?
Yes.
Doctor, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 108 for purposes of identification. Can you please tell us what is depicted in that photograph?
So this is the contents of that envelope, and inside the envelope a couple of small bones as well as a few rocks, and then one set of lower leg bones, tibia and fibula.
Doctor, showing you what's been marked in State's Exhibit 109 for purposes of identification. Can you please tell us what is depicted in that photograph?
This is just a closer look at the previous picture. So the tibia and fibula.
Doctor, once you had sorted through and identified the contents from the second excavation, were you able to add those to your prior layout of baby Richardson?
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 110 for purposes of identification. Can you please tell us what is depicted in that photograph, Doctor?
So this is essentially similar to the previous photograph where we looked at all of the bones that had been recovered, except now we have added the tibia and fibula, the lower leg bones, to the collection.
And at this point, are you still missing any of the skeletal remains?
Yeah, so the other leg, the other lower leg, feet and ankles, and still a couple of ribs and vertebral bodies.
Absent those missing bones, Doctor, does this represent a nearly complete set of skeletonized bones from baby Richardson?
Yes.
And again, these photographs that we've gone through, do they accurately depict the condition of baby Richardson's skeletal remains when they were provided to you?
Yes.
And at the time that you performed your autopsy on her?
Yes.
Now, Doctor, you had initially said that when you were completing your autopsy, as you were going through the process, that you received additional information, correct?
Yes.
And I think that you said that you received audio transcripts from the police interviews of the defendant and scene information.
Yes, I did.
You also said that it's typical for you to collect that collateral information.
Yes.
And can you explain why that is?
In order to determine both cause and manner of death, all of the information leading up to the death, at the scene, during the autopsy, any toxicology, if toxicology can be performed, all of those things will make a more complete picture so that you can arrive at an accurate determination of cause and manner of death.
And Doctor, separate and apart from this case, can you give the ladies and gentlemen an example of what you mean?
So, for example, if someone dies during an electrocution, specifically a low voltage, like household current, a low voltage electrocution, it is likely you will not have any findings on the body that will give you any clue that that is what happened. So if you don't get information from the scene to tell you, for example, this person was standing there using a power tool that had a frayed cord, and then in the middle of using this power tool had a sudden collapse and died, you would never be able to arrive at the accurate cause and manner of death without that extra information, because sometimes there aren't findings on the body that you're going to be able to look at the autopsy table. So it's important to look at everything.
So just to be fair, Doctor, in your capacity as a forensic pathologist, or for any forensic pathologist, you do not look at the autopsy itself in a vacuum?
Correct.
Doctor, when you reviewed the statements of the defendant in this case, were there statements that she made that were significant to you in helping you to make a determination as to cause of death in this case?
Yes.
And if you will, what were the statements that she made that you found to be relevant?
The statements during the police interview were statements about sounds that the baby had made: gurgling, crying, movement, all signs of life.
Was it relevant to you that she had indicated that she thought she might have killed her baby?
Yes.
that she might have killed her baby when she squeezed it too hard,
Yes.
that her baby was alive for about 5 minutes,
Yes.
that her baby was alive before she squeezed her.
I object to the direct.
I'll sustain the objection as to the form of the questions.
Doctor, when she makes statements indicating that she may have taken her daughter's life, was that relevant to you?
Yes.
When she made statements indicating that her daughter may have been alive for a period of time, was that relevant to you?
Yes.
How so?
It all indicates life.
You deal with dead bodies, correct?
Yes.
And I'm not trying to be insensitive here, but the death, the dead bodies, the processes that the bodies go through, have you ever had an experience where a deceased infant cries,
No.
gurgles,
No.
breathes,
No.
moves?
No.
Was it concerning to you when you were considering all of the information and trying to reach your opinion on cause of death that she indicated that she may have tried to cremate her child?
Yes.
How so?
It indicates, along with the other scene information, of a deliberate attempt to try to hide or conceal the infant.
Doctor, the scene information that was provided to you regarding the backyard burial, did that factor into your opinion as to cause of death?
Yes, again, it's a deliberate attempt to hide the baby.
Now, doctor, you had indicated previously when we were talking about doing an inventory of baby Richardson's skeletal remains that you had consulted with somebody.
Yes.
And who was that?
An anthropologist, Dr. Murray.
Dr. Elizabeth Murray?
Yes.
What was your purpose in consulting with Dr. Murray?
We asked Dr. Murray to come in and do an inventory of all of the skeletal remains, give us, if she could, an estimate of the age, and also evaluate for any injury that she could see.
And was the determination or the decision to request her assistance on this case made by the Montgomery County Coroner's Office?
Yes.
Was it ever done at the request of the Sheriff's Office?
No.
Was it ever done at the request of the Prosecutor's Office?
No.
Were you ever directed to go out and find additional information by the Prosecutor's Office?
No.
When you consulted with Dr. Murray, you said you asked her to help with doing the inventory.
Yes.
And was that in fact done?
Yes.
And is that how we or you and Dr. Murray arrived at the picture that we see depicted in State's Exhibit 110?
Yes.
Was she able, you said one of your other purposes was in asking her if she could make an age determination on the skeletal remains of baby Richardson. Was she able to do that?
Yes.
And what was her estimate as to the age of baby Richardson?
Her estimate was 38 to 40 weeks.
And did you use that information in your autopsy report?
Yes.
You said that you also asked her to look at the bones and do further analysis to determine if there were any signs of trauma.
Yes.
And did she do that as well?
Yes.
And was she able to give you any indication of whether or not there was any evidence of trauma to the remains of baby Richardson that you relied upon in reaching your cause of death opinion?
She also looked at the fractures on the skull bones that we looked at in one of these pictures. And I believe she also could not make a determination as to whether they had happened before death or after death. And then she also noticed that there were some darkened areas on a few of the bones.
And I believe showing you again what's been marked as State's Exhibit 99. Are those the darkened areas that you are referring to?
Yes.
On the, on the end of the ribs?
Yes.
Thank you, doctor. Now, Dr. Murray actually examined the bones on 2 different occasions, correct?
She did.
And when she offered you the opinion regarding trauma to the bones, was the initial opinion offered after she did her first examination?
The fracture, yes, both were after the first examination.
Okay. And then did she have an opportunity to return to your crime lab on a second date and re-examine the bones after they had dried further?
Yes.
And at that point in time, did she indicate to you that she was no longer able to offer a definitive opinion as to whether or not those were indications of thermal injury to the bones?
That's right. She had backed away from that opinion and was not sure that they had been burned, that the bones had been burned.
Now let me ask you this, doctor. The fact that she could not give you an indication that the skull fractures were, that those occurred pre or post-mortem, or the fact that she could not give you a definitive opinion on whether or not there was any evidence of thermal injury to the bones, were you still able, based on your examination of the bones and the scene and the statements that were provided to you, able to form your own opinion as to cause of death?
Yes.
Without Dr. Murray's information, did you still feel like you had enough to go forward?
Yes.
And why is that?
Information from other sources, the scene, and also from the police interview.
Now, doctor, I had previously asked you in your testimony if you would have given the same opinion that you reached in this case to both the state and the defense if they had spoken to you about your examination and autopsy of baby Richardson. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you did have an opportunity to speak to the defense attorney in this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at that time, I believe he questioned you about the findings of his experts.
Correct.
And were you willing to take a look at his experts' reports?
Yes.
You are aware that he retained both Carl Schmidt and Mark Levon to examine the skeletal remains of baby Richardson.
Correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I am going to hand you a copy of the report authored by Dr. Carl Schmidt. Have you seen that report before?
Yes.
You've read its contents?
Yes.
And let me go ahead and offer you the report of Dr. Mark Levon. Have you also seen that report before?
Yes.
And have you also read its contents?
Yes.
And in fact, have you discussed the contents of those reports with the defense attorney?
Yes.
Starting with Dr. Schmidt's report.
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may. You may continue, Ms. Croft.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, Ms. Brown, or Dr. Brown, I apologize. Let's flip to Dr. Levon's report, okay? And I believe that is the one that you had communication with the defense about?
Yes.
And let me ask you this. Are you open to receiving new information whenever you are conducting an autopsy?
Sure,
From any source?
sure.
And when you receive additional information, if you find anything in there that's relevant or causes you to reconsider any of your initial opinions, are you willing to change your opinion accordingly?
Sure,
Okay. You looked at Dr. Levon's report.
yes.
Was there anything contained within that report that caused you to reconsider your opinion?
No,
When you talked to the defense on this case, Dr. Levon offered 4 opinions, correct?
yes,
And you went through each one of those with the defense?
yes,
And in looking at the report, the first thing that Dr. Levon offers is that the skeletal remains showed no identifiable evidence of thermal injury. Did you disagree with that based on your examination?
I don't disagree with that.
Does that mean that there was no thermal injury, or you just agree that there was no evidence of thermal injury on the skeletal remains?
On the skeletal remains, I did not identify anything that I could say was thermal injury.
And again, just to be fair, in this case, all you've got are the skeletal remains, correct?
Correct.
This baby did not die in a hospital. Is that your understanding?
Yes,
This baby was not brought to you within days after her death. Is that correct?
correct.
Judge, objection.
Sustained as to the form of the question.
Doctor, if you had had baby Richardson's entire body, would you perhaps have been able to offer an opinion as to whether or not there was evidence of thermal injury to her?
Objection again, Judge. It's legal.
Go ahead and answer.
Yes, I would have been able to have a more complete external examination. The baby would have been intact, and certainly internal examination as well with internal organs.
So you and Dr. Levon didn't disagree on point 1, that there's no definitive evidence of thermal injury to her bones.
Correct.
Dr. Levon's second point was that the skeletal remains showed no identifiable evidence of violent traumatic injury. Did you agree or disagree with that statement?
I disagreed with that statement. I identified the fractures of the skull bones, the parietal bones. However, did also clarify that to say I don't know whether they were made before death or after death, but they are there.
So you documented their existence.
Yes,
You just are not able to offer an opinion as to whether they are pre or post mortem.
correct.
Dr. Levon's third point was due to the advanced state of decomposition and lack of soft tissue for examination, there is absolutely no identifiable evidence of live birth. Do you agree or disagree, doctor?
By looking at the bones alone with no other information, there's nothing that I can say just by looking at the bones that there is a live birth.
And so again, we have agreement. By looking at the skeletal remains alone, we cannot say.
Correct.
I'm going to go back to your original testimony, doctor. Is that why a forensic pathologist does not work in a vacuum?
Yes.
Dr. Levon's fourth point, because of the lack of identifiable violent injury and the lack of evidence of live birth, it is incorrect to state that this child died of homicidal violence of undetermined etiology. Do you agree or disagree, doctor?
I disagree.
And why is that?
Because as part of my job, I am required to look at all of the information. And so I did that. And that included the scene information and the information gathered during the police interview.
And did you share those opinions with the defense?
Yes.
Your Honor, if I may have a moment.
You may.
Doctor, in this case, did you prepare a report documenting your autopsy of baby Richardson and containing your findings in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Doctor, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 96 for purposes of identification. Do you recognize that exhibit?
I do.
Can you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what it is?
This is my autopsy report.
And does that autopsy report contain your opinion as to the cause of death of baby Richardson?
Yes.
Doctor, based upon your education, training, and experience as a forensic pathologist, and based upon your autopsy of baby Richardson, do you have an opinion within a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause of baby Richardson's death?
Yes.
And can you please state your opinion?
Homicidal violence of undetermined etiology.
And can you please explain your opinion to the jury?
So looking at all of the information, the scene, the police interview, the evaluation by the anthropologist, my autopsy evaluation, all of the evidence points to a homicide, but the exact cause of the homicide, the exact cause of death can't be determined.
Doctor, could you have obtained more information had baby Richardson been presented to you for autopsy in the days following her death?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Doctor, did the actions of the defendant in any way impact your ability to make conclusions on this case?
Objection.
The objection will be sustained. Let's move on, Ms. Kraft.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Ms. Rickers, are we prepared to go forward with cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Behind you. Take me 1 second here. Dr. Brown,
Yes.
I want to start my examination of you by talking about just the remains, okay?
Okay.
Based on your examination of the remains, you cannot tell us to any reasonable degree of scientific certainty that Annabelle suffered any injuries prior to her death, correct?
Based on my exam only, at the autopsy table, although I see fractures of the skull, I can't tell you whether or not they are made before death or after death.
So the answer to my question is that you can't state to any degree of reasonable scientific certainty that, let me see if I can say this correctly again, that Annabelle suffered any injuries prior to her death.
Based on only the examination of the skeletal remains, I cannot.
Thank you. Now, based on that examination, you cannot tell us to any reasonable degree of scientific certainty that Annabelle was born alive. Is that correct?
Based on just the autopsy examination alone, I cannot determine whether it was a live birth.
Dr. Brown? If Mr. Rickers asks you a yes or no question, he is entitled to a yes or no answer. Go ahead, Mr. Rickers.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, based on your examination, you cannot tell us to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that Skylar's statement to the police that Annabelle was a stillborn isn't true, correct?
Correct.
Now yet, Dr. Allen, in your report, you list homicide as the cause of death. We all heard that, correct?
Yes.
And you indicated that that's not based solely on your physical examination of Annabelle, correct?
Correct.
You indicated it's based on the police interrogations, correct?
That is one piece, yes.
You'd agree with me, Dr. Allen, that you're not a trained police officer, is that correct?
Correct.
And you're not trained in interrogation techniques, are you?
No, I'm not.
And you're not trained in the Reed technique, are you?
No.
You're not trained to identify false confessions, are you?
No.
You're not trained to identify psychological predispositions to acquiesce to authority, are you?
No.
You're a forensic pathologist, we know that. That means that your training and experience on how to examine a human corpse is related to the cause of death, correct?
The autopsy procedure. Yes.
If we focus strictly on your examination of Annabelle's remains in this case, with your actual expertise, you cannot tell us the exact cause of death in this case. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Now, you hired Dr. Beth Murray, correct?
Yes.
And so the jury understands this. She's a forensic anthropologist, correct?
She is an anthropologist.
She's not a forensic anthropologist?
She may be considered a forensic anthropologist.
You would call a forensic anthropologist to look at these remains, wouldn't you?
I'm not exactly sure what her, whether she is specifically an anthropologist or a forensic anthropologist. She does forensic work. She is an anthropologist that does forensic work.
Doctor, the purpose of hiring Dr. Murray, the forensic anthropologist, was for her to determine not only the age of Annabelle, but it was also to determine whether there was any trauma to Annabelle. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you had attached the report of Dr. Elizabeth Murray, correct?
Yes.
But it's without an addendum, isn't it?
I'm not aware of an addendum.
Well, I didn't say there was one. I'm saying there isn't one attached, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Brown, I'm going to go through some email exchanges between you and Dr. Murray, okay?
Okay.
And you've seen these.
Yes.
In fact, I think you provided them to me over a year ago.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you knew that in these emails that Dr. Murray had provided a report to the prosecution and they weren't happy with that. Is that correct?
Overrule. Answer if you can.
I don't know what the exchange was between Dr. Murray and the prosecutor's office.
Doctor, I'm going to show on this device here, if I remember how to use it. This is an email from Dr. Murray to you, and it's dated September 6, and it's 10:52 a.m. I'll put this on. Am I doing that correctly? Oh, thank you. Which one? Oh, I got it. Thank you. She says right there, does she not? Susan, that's your first name, correct?
Yes.
The prosecutor's office seems upset with me. So she was upset after she talked to the prosecutor, correct?
This is what she writes in her email.
And so we can assume from that they were upset with her, is that correct?
I don't know how the prosecutor's office felt.
She goes further down, right here. Apparently, my report has definitely upset their apple cart, but it is what it is. Does that tell us that they were upset with her report?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to expert testimony, your job is to evaluate the testimony of an expert the same way you evaluate the testimony of any other witness. Sometimes I'm going to allow you to hear evidence which is not necessarily otherwise admissible, things other people say. You are allowed to consider that evidence for the purpose of what effect, if any, it has on this witness's credibility and this witness's opinions. So you are allowed to consider that for that purpose alone. You are not to consider it for the truth of the contents of that, but only what effect it has on this expert. Mr. Rickers, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. On the same day, that being September 6th, you replied to Dr. Murray, and we'll see this in 1 second here. This is at (1:54 p.m.) Sorry. You read that at the very top of the page? That's your response to her, isn't it?
Yes.
And your response says, if I'd have realized it was so crucial to their game plan, I would have done it. What's that mean?
I'm sorry. May
read
I
that first
correct
line for
that?
me?
That was her. She is sending
I'm
that to
sorry.
me. I'm sorry.
I agree. Well, let's go on down to September 6th again, 3 p.m. Can you read that?
Yes.
And that's your response.
Yes.
And can you read that for the jury out loud?
I also did not realize it was a crucial part of their game plan. If you would like to do this extra step and they would like for you to do this, it is fine with us. Do you want to ask them if they want that to happen, or would you like for me to talk to Russell, Dr. Updegrove, about it? They have not called me about any of the findings in your report.
And then her immediate response to you immediate being a couple hours later. Go on down, please. And she says to you, and I underlined this, I'm happy to do a second exam and addendum to the report. But if I don't see it, that's what I have to say. And she goes on to further say, I ain't gonna lie to them, but I sure ain't gonna lie for them. Correct?
Yes.
When she says for them, we know it's the prosecutor, correct?
Correct.
May I have 1 second, Your Honor?
You may.
Now, you're aware that she was happy to do a second or a third exam of these remains and do an addendum to her report, are you not?
That's what she says.
So you are aware that she was willing to do...
Yes, I am.
And to do an addendum?
Yes.
And you're aware that, I'm going to show you, this is an email between Mr. Knippen and Dr. Murray.
Your Honor, I'm going to object and ask to approach.
You may. Mr. Rickers, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Allen, I'm going to show you an email between Dr. Murray and Mr. Knippen, okay? And I only want to look at the highlighted portion here for the purposes of your testimony today. That says, this is from Mr. Knippen to Dr. Murray. If it is now your opinion that you do not believe that there is any evidence to suggest that the bones were burned, I will need you to do an addendum to your report with this additional information so it can be provided to defense counsel. We never got that report, right?
I did not get a report.
And from the emails that we've covered, it was clear that she would have been more than happy to do another exam to help you to come to a right conclusion, correct? It's clear that she wanted to do another exam. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. And just so I'm clear, neither one of you, meaning Dr. Murray and you, Dr. Brown, really didn't understand that the burning was a big part of their case, correct?
I was not aware of that. No.
All right. Let's talk about your report. Let me start over here. You indicated that you can't do this in a vacuum. That's why you looked at the interrogations of Skylar, correct?
Yes.
And I assume you looked at the photos of the grave?
I did not have any photos of the grave provided.
Did you have any photos whatsoever of the backyard?
No,
You didn't think it was important?
I didn't have that provided to me.
All right. Again, concentrating on the skull and the fractures that you just told us when Ms. Kraft was questioning you. You don't know whether those fractures happened before or after. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, as I recall your testimony, and we've talked about it on my cross, is that you hired Dr. Murray not only to determine the age of Annabelle, but you also retained her to determine if there was any trauma, correct?
Correct.
And that she didn't have that opportunity, did she? She didn't have that opportunity to microscopically examine that fracture, did she?
She did not microscopically examine the fracture. She grossly, with her eyes, examined the remains.
Same as you. You use your eyes.
Correct.
You don't even have the type of microscope at your office to examine those fractures closely, do you?
I do not have a dissecting microscope.
Now, you remember when I sent to you a number of reports. I think you've gone over some of those with Ms. Kraft, is that right?
Yes.
One of those reports is from Dr. Latham. Remember that?
Yes.
Dr. Latham was hired by the prosecutors. You know that?
Yes.
Did they provide you with Dr. Latham's report?
I don't remember who provided me with the report.
Well, did you get more than one report of Dr. Latham?
I don't recall.
Well, we know that at least I provided it to you, correct?
Yes.
And you read it.
Yes.
And Dr. Dr. Latham indicates in her report, if you remember, that there were no signs of homicidal trauma to those remains, correct? She doesn't use homicidal, she uses no trauma to those remains that are a result of any violence. Is that correct?
Well, I don't remember exactly how it reads, but yes, that is what she indicated.
And she is a trained forensic anthropologist, correct? You don't know?
I have had no contact with Dr. Latham. I read her report. I'm sure she's a trained anthropologist.
Thank you. And again, you said you were open in this investigation to fill in the vacuum. Why isn't that part of your report? Why isn't Dr. Latham's report, Dr. Latham, who was hired by the prosecution, why isn't that an addendum to your report, showing that those fractures were not a result of any homicidal injury? Why is it?
May I reference my report?
You can reference it here. I'll put it up on the board.
What I reference in my report in terms of the fractures is that I can't determine if they are pre or post-mortem.
Someone else, you hired Dr. Murray originally, the forensic pathologist, to determine what's the cause of the trauma. Did you not? It's in her report that you did. Yes?
That was one of the reasons that we hired her.
Right.
Yes.
But she didn't get that opportunity, did she? She didn't microscopically look at those fractures, did she?
She did not.
Right. And so, your report and what you testified to when Ms. Kraft was talking to you is that you don't know whether those fractures are before or after, right? Pre, post mortem, right?
Correct.
Yet you were given a report by Dr. Latham, hired by the prosecution, that said that those fractures had nothing to do with any death. Why didn't you attach that to your report? Why didn't you make an addendum?
She was not hired by our office and thus providing the report to me. The report was provided to the prosecutor's office.
But then I provided it to you. Did you check with the prosecutors and say, is this true? You hired Dr. Latham and you didn't send me the report? Did you do that? Did you do that?
I do not recall whether the prosecutor provided the report to me.
Or did you call him after I provided it to you?
I don't recall that I called them.
But that report indicates that instead of Perry, there wasn't any question. Those fractures were post-mortem. No question.
According to Dr. Latham, they are post-mortem.
So why did you come in here and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that I can't tell whether the fractures were before or after death? When you have Dr. Latham's report.
I'm providing the jury with my opinion, which was I couldn't tell.
I apologize, and I hate to be beating a dead horse, but you just told us through the examination conducted by Ms. Kraft that you're open to other evidence. Well, there's other evidence, right? Dr. Latham's report is other evidence, and you didn't bother to attach that as an addendum to your report, did you?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Overruled. Go ahead.
I did not attach a copy of Dr. Latham's report to my report.
I apologize, Dr. Brown. I should have stated it this way. You didn't write an addendum to attach to your original report to say that based on Dr. Latham's report that any fractures that you observed were post-mortem.
Correct.
Thank you. Just so the jury is clear on this, Dr. Allen Brown, you already testified that you don't have the microscope or whatever we call it to be able to examine those bones, correct?
We do not have a dissecting microscope.
And so this opinion of yours was based on eyeballing the fractures.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, did you say
Yes.
Oh. And yet, you had to bring in Dr. Murray, a forensic anthropologist, and the prosecution had to bring in a forensic anthropologist to determine whether there was any trauma, correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
And The reason we had to bring in forensic anthropologists is because they're trained to examine fractures like that to determine whether or not they contributed to death or whether they were after death. Correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
The first time that Dr. Murray, the forensic anthropologist, came to examine those bones was July 20th, correct?
Yes.
And as a result of her opinion, which we now know was incorrect, that being that the bones were charred, but as a result of that, your office, through, I believe it was Dr. Updegrove, because he testified to this 2 days ago, called Detective Fain and said that the forensic anthropologist said that the remains had been burned. Remember that? Yes or no? It's very simple.
I believe that he called, yes.
And told the detective that the bones, the remains of Annabelle, had been burned.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, that reminds me, when the prosecutor was showing you these remains, all these remains that you put of Annabelle up there, you circled I think it was part of the rib bones, that they looked dark and stuff. That was because those remains of Annabelle were wet, correct?
I don't know why they were darkened.
Didn't you have a conversation with Dr. Murray when she came back on August 17th? She did, right?
Yes.
She came back on August 17th, and she says, "Oh, I can no longer say that the remains were burned." Didn't she say that to you?
Yes.
And didn't she say, you and I looked at that back on July 20th, and boy, it looked kind of burned, but I wasn't sure, but now I can't say it because they're no longer wet. Didn't she say that?
I don't recall that she said they were no longer wet. She said that they looked different.
That they were dry. Did she say that?
I don't recall if she said they were dry.
I got it. So, we do know, though, that because of that opinion that was corrected later, that information was passed on to Detective Fain, correct?
Yes.
We also know that as a result of that opinion, which later turned out to be wrong, that led to a second search of the residence, meaning the yard and the gravesite, correct?
Yes.
And we also know that also led to the second interrogation of Skylar, correct?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to, on your report, right here. Reported history from police interview of attempted incineration. All right? This is the topic we're going to cover now. Now, I believe you indicated, since you don't, when when you do your investigation, you don't do these in vacuums, right?
Yes.
And as I understand it, you relied on not only the remains of Annabelle that you had put in some sort of order, but also on these police interrogations, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I missed the first part of
I
what you said.
apologize if I'm not speaking loudly enough. I said you indicated that you came to your conclusions, how about that? Based on your putting together the skeletal remains, right?
Yes,
The police interrogations
yes,
and reports of the scene, is that what I heard?
yes.
Anything else? Did you consider anything else?
Information about the age determination from the anthropologist.
Okay, Dr. Murphy, when looking at the bones, did a certain measurement which told her the approximate gestation age of the fetus. Is that correct?
Correct.
Anything else?
No.
That's it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, again, we're going to the topic of attempted incineration. And you are aware, like most of the world, that when Skylar was indicted on August 4th, that prosecutor's office held a press conference for 30 minutes or so and announced to the world that not only did...
Sustained. Sure, we'll disregard that question.
So, let's, again, staying on topic here, the attempted incineration. On September 6th, when we went through these emails earlier in your examination by me, we knew that the prosecutor wasn't happy with Dr. Murray's report, correct? Because she changed her opinion about the burn, correct?
That's what it sounds like from the emails.
And again, you, well, let's talk about the fact that the anthropologists that have been hired, there are 3 of them. We had Dr. Murray, we have Dr. Latham, hired by the prosecutor, and we have Dr. Sims, who was hired by us. All 3 of them agree that the remains were not burned, correct?
Correct.
Now, I didn't quite understand when, and not because, it might be because of my hearing, and I'm not kidding, I have a hard time sometimes hearing things. When Ms. Kraft was questioning you, I thought you said that you either, did you review the video? Is that what you did to come to your conclusions? The video of the interrogation of Skylar?
I did 2 things, looked at both the video along with the written transcript.
Now, Doctor, I'm going to show you a few clips. I believe it's from the second interview. Let me take this off the board here for a minute. And when we see all these clips...
Tell you what, Mr. Rick, why don't we take a break so that we can get the technical aspects of this all set up.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break for the morning. Remember what I have previously told you. Do not begin thinking about how this case should come out or begin talking about the case amongst yourselves. We're going to take about a 15-minute break. We will be back here ready to go at 5 till. Mr. Rickers, you may resume.
cause. Okay. Woo-wee. I've seen I've seen court cases where experts get grilled, but this one, this one, I tell you, is really gone off. Usually, but usually a cross-examination of an expert witness, like a forensic pathologist in this case, would take a more calm approach, just to get more information. This defense attorney is literally digging in his heels. Some may call it bullying, others may call it a tactic, but I hate to do it. Slamming papers down and intimidating the witness. Maybe so. Maybe so, but I gotta give credit where credit's due. I don't like it, but he's doing what he's got to do. He's trying to get information out, and he is trying to present some kind of reasonable doubt. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, in a criminal jury trial, and you have 12, and the op the and the result is supposed to be a unanimous verdict. On the defense side, it only takes one. That's where reasonable doubt comes in. If the defense can convince one member of that 12-person jury that his client is not guilty of the charges she's been accused of, then that usually spells a lot of problems. That one person can swing a whole entire jury to go not guilty, or that one person can hang a jury up, resulting in a mistrial and having to start it all over again. So, with that being said, let's get back, and we're going to continue with the cross-examination of Dr. Susan Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Brown, I think we're left off, we're on the topic of the self-admission of incineration of baby Annabelle, correct? We're on that topic. You know that.
Okay.
Now, you told us again, just so that we're all on the same page, that part of your opinion was based on these interrogation tapes, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to show you several clips from that interrogation tape. I believe it was July 20th. Okay, this was after a call from your office to Lieutenant Vane, giving him information that Dr. Murray had thought that the baby's remains were burned. Okay?
Okay.
Would you play number 50? Do I have to tell you, or you know which numbers I want?
I can play 57 or 71 sequentially.
Great, thank you.
I'm on the fire. What fire? Did it burn her? I promise on anything I didn't burn her. My dad has lots of money. I didn't burn her. Are you sure? I swear on anything.
Let's go back once. Go back one and go slower, please.
I didn't burn her.
Are you sure?
I swear on anything
You're sure?
that I'm sure of. That I'm sure of.
You didn't did you burn anything around her? Did you try to maybe melt the dirt or anything? Was there,
Stop. Put that back on, please.
you didn't did you burn anything around her? Did you try to maybe melt the dirt or anything? Was there any reason for any of that?
No.
Did stand or anything?
No, and I did nothing with fire. Nothing.
Is it possible originally you put her in the fire pit before you...
No.
I don't mean with a lit fire, but I mean put her in the fire
No.
pit.
What about some other heat source? Was there any heat involved in anything? This was been after she was dead, so it's not
No.
no microwave, no oven, no nothing
The towel was black.
No, I mean, we know there was some sort of fire. I know it's...
And I understand it.
Keep that on there.
It goes away.
No, I mean, we know there was some sort of fire. I know it's...
You remember those clips, not the clips, but you remember the interview where that was said during the initial stage of the interview, Dr. Brown?
Yes,
Did you ignore those statements, Dr. Brown?
I did not.
Did you see her surprised, or didn't she act surprised when they asked her, tell us about the fire? Didn't you think that she was surprised by that? Yes or no?
I don't know.
Yeah. I assume, so that you're not deciding this in a vacuum, I'm assuming that you read Detective Carter's report where she claimed that Skylar lit her baby's foot with a lighter and put out the flames after they reached her chest. Did you read that in her report?
I did not read her report.
Wasn't part of this analysis, this filling the vacuum so you can come up with an opinion?
I did not read her report.
Doctor, this has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 11. And, okay, thank you.
LL.
Exhibit LL. I don't know what I said, but can you hold it up? Push, no, where, at the top where I show the, thank you. Doctor, at the very top of the page, right here, that's, Kathy Edwards is my legal assistant. But I sent this March 15th, 2018 email to you, is that correct?
Yes.
And I did that after you and I had a phone conversation that you were kind enough to set up with me to talk about your findings, correct?
Yes.
And let's go to the bottom. We discussed only one report during that. I'm an idiot when it comes to these things. We discussed just Lavon's report, but you also, I sent to you all the other reports too, correct?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm confirming our conversation in this email, correct?
Yes.
And in confirming that, where I say right here, finally, when I ask you if it was possible to put a lighter to a baby's leg and ignite that baby to where the flames are waist high, you indicated, what did you say? Can you read that for me?
I never tried it. I don't know.
And then I ask you if any of the above, where we summarize Dr. Levon's report, I said, if I misstated anything in my confirming email, please let me know of any corrections, correct?
Yes.
And you responded pretty quickly. We'll see it Monday. Let me see that time. Again, same date. This was at 3:22, or 32, I apologize, 32, right? This is your response to my confirmation of what we discussed, correct?
Clear.
Correct.
Now, the only thing that you corrected was that regarding statement number 2, you identified multiple fractures, correct?
Yes.
That's the only thing. You did not correct, going back to my original confirmation, that you said, I never tried it, meaning putting a lighter to a baby's leg, and having the baby combust and have flames up to her chest. You did say, I never tried it, I don't know, didn't you?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm done with that. Thank you. Doctor, based on your medical background, you'd agree that a baby is 75 to 80% water, wouldn't you? Yes or no?
Yes.
And would you agree that trying to light a baby on fire with a lighter, that would be similar to trying to light a wet toilet paper roll on fire? You agree with that?
I don't know.
Doctor, are you saying that based on that interview, you think that Skylar tried to light her baby on fire? Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
Do you know how many BTUs are in a flame of a lighter?
No.
Do you know how many BTUs it takes to burn a human body?
No.
Have you ever heard of warnings from any governmental agency or anywhere that tells you when lighting the barbecue, for a barbecue, watch out, you may combust into flames? Have you ever heard of a warning like that?
No.
I raised 2 children. We have fireplaces, we had fires outside. I don't remember ever telling my children, be careful, don't get too close to the fire because they're going to combust. Just because.
Objection, I'm not sure if there's a question here or just from me.
Go ahead and finish your question.
Thank you. Would you agree that that's silly? We don't just combust. Isn't that silly? Yes or no?
We do not combust.
And when I say combust, we're talking about putting like a little lighter to a baby's foot or leg and they just all of a sudden burst into flames. That doesn't make sense, does it? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you. Let me see that. Yeah.
Defense Exhibit YY.
We're looking now at Defendant's Exhibit YY. That's the very back of the yard along the tree line where eventually Skylar pointed out to the police that were there where her baby was buried. You never saw that photo when you're determining what your opinion was?
No.
Let's go. Doctor, this is Exhibit DDD, Defense Exhibit DDD. That's a picture we learned earlier from either Dr. Updegrove or one of the deputies. That's the gravesite. You ever see that?
No.
Didn't think it was important to look at it?
I had a report from the Warren County coroner as to the scene that he went to. I did not see a picture.
Well, wouldn't it have helped to look at that picture to see if there was any ashes or anything that would show that that baby was lit on fire and had flames up to its chest? Wouldn't that be kind of important for you as a forensic anthropologist? Wouldn't that be important?
I'm
Yes
a
or no?
pathologist, but I did not receive reports that they had seen information
Well,
to
Doctor-
show that.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Did you finish your answer?
Yes?
Doctor, you work with police and prosecutors as part of your job, do you not?
Yes.
And if you need more information, you ask for it, don't you?
Yes.
And by the way, you don't do any moonlighting, do you? You don't, like if somebody who is defending somebody wrongfully accused and asks you to render opinion, you don't do that, do you?
I do not do that.
So your job is to, as you said earlier, determine causes of death, manner of death, and you only work with prosecutors and police officers, correct? Yes or no?
Well, I will appear in court by subpoena with whoever subpoenas me, defense or prosecutor.
So the answer to my question is what? Do you work only with police officers and prosecutors?
Objection, Your Honor, she just answered the question.
Overruled. Go ahead and answer if you can.
If I receive a subpoena from the defense, I will respond to the defense just as I talked with the defense on the telephone when he requested that we talk.
Maybe I'm not stating my question correctly. What I'm getting to here, Dr. Brown, is that in doing your job with the Montgomery County Coroner's Office as a pathologist, you work with prosecutors and with police officers. Yes or no?
Yes.
And in filling this vacuum that you told us all about, you didn't think it was necessary to look at scene photographs? No? You didn't think it was necessary?
In terms of the scene, I had a report from the Warren County coroner, and they did not take any scene photographs. So I did not see any scene photographs.
You didn't ask the police for the photographs that they took?
I did not.
You would have, Have you ever been around a campfire?
Yes,
Do you ever build a campfire?
probably not.
Do you ever clear bushes under trees and then burn them where the little leaves and branches? You ever done that?
No,
Would you agree that when you burn something and it's on the ground, that it leaves a mark showing the burn area? Would you agree with that?
I don't know what kind of mark it's going to leave.
Don't you think that's kind of important when you claim that you believe Skylar burned her baby and the flames came up to her chest? Don't you think that's important? Yes or no?
The important information I did gather from the Warren County coroner who went to the scene and did the recovery.
So you didn't fill this vacuum with any pictures or reports from the police, did you?
A report, a verbal report, not a picture.
A verbal report from who?
The Warren County coroner who went to the
Dr.
scene.
Updegrove.
Yes.
Yeah. And he didn't report seeing any burning, did he?
No,
And doctor, looking at this picture that was taken by the police, defendant's exhibit DDD, that's the gravesite. Do you see any evidence of any burning whatsoever?
no,
You don't know. You're telling this jury you believe she burned her baby, but you don't know whether it would leave any kind of evidence in the ground. Is that what you're telling us?
I'm telling you that based on the police interview, her statement was that she attempted to cremate her baby.
But based on that interview, you didn't want to develop it any further. You didn't want to support your decision that you thought that maybe she burned her baby, correct? You didn't ask for any photos of the scene to show any burn marks that would verify that this actually happened?
Again, I had a verbal report from Dr. Updegrove, the Warren County coroner who went to the scene.
I didn't ask that question.
I did not see any photographs.
I ask you, don't you think, as a forensic anthropologist that comes in here and tells this jury that this child burned her baby, don't you think it's kind of important to at least find some evidence of that? Yes or no?
It is important, and my evidence was based on her interview.
Without anything supporting that. And you don't even know that a human being can be lit on fire with a lighter. You think that's possible?
I think it's possible that you can have your hair catch on fire.
That wasn't the report. That wasn't what she said. That wasn't what she said in her interview. You didn't see where she said, oh, I took a lighter and burned her hair, did you?
What she said was, I tried to cremate my baby.
We'll let the jury decide when they see this interview.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. The jury will disregard that remark.
Let's go to your reported history of a live birth. You watched all 8 hours of the interrogations, correct?
Yes,
And in the process of coming to your opinions, you knew that Skylar was still in high school and she had just turned 18 when she gave birth to a stillborn baby. You were aware of that? Yes or no? Were you aware of it?
I am not aware that the baby was stillborn. Yes, I am aware of the other facts.
Well, you're aware, in addition to the age of Skylar, and you're aware that she just turned 18, and I take it from the interrogation, you're aware that they took her in to a 6x8 windowless room to talk about this tragic event. You're aware of that, are you not?
Sustained. Jury will disregard that question.
Are you aware, let me rephrase it. You're aware that they put her in a 6x8 interrogation room, correct?
I don't know the dimensions of the room.
And you're aware that it was windowless, right?
I don't know if there's a window in the room.
Okay. We're still on the topic of evidence of a live birth. In watching these interviews, did you pay any attention to the fact that Skylar said that she did not cut the umbilical cord?
Yes.
You did. What did you paid attention to that? When a baby comes out and its umbilical cord is not attached, what does that mean, doctor?
Not attached.
Not attached. You don't have to cut it. What does that mean to you?
An umbilical cord not being attached would mean at some point it broke.
Would the baby die as a result of not getting oxygen and nutrients from that umbilical cord?
A baby can die in those circumstances.
You realize that in watching the interrogation, that the detectives didn't follow up on any of that, did they? Did they?
They asked her several times about the umbilical cord.
Was that because they were surprised that she didn't cut it?
I do not know why they asked certain questions and did not ask other questions.
Let me ask you this. Did they appear surprised when they went back to that subject? You didn't cut the umbilical cord?
I don't know that they were surprised.
Doctor, this may be out of your expertise, but I would think that you'd fill the vacuum with this. When a woman, a pregnant woman or a pregnant girl, is in their third trimester and they're bleeding, does that say anything to you? Do you have any knowledge of what that means?
I would go see a doctor.
So you don't think that that could be a sign of any kind of placenta issue?
I would go see an OBGYN.
I didn't ask that question, doctor. I know you're trying to help the prosecution.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I'd like for you to
Question, Mr.
answer my
Richardson.
question.
I'm not an OBGYN. I would go see an OBGYN.
I didn't ask that question. I asked you about your knowledge. You know what a placenta abruption means, don't you, doctor?
Yeah.
You want to tell the jury, isn't that where the placenta pulls away from the uterine wall?
Yes.
Do you remember in your review of these interrogations, do you remember Skylar telling them, meaning the interrogators, that she was spotting on April 3rd?
No.
No. Did you, I don't see it in your report, did you look at Hilltop, her obstetrician's records in coming to your opinion?
Yes, I saw medical records.
You didn't put that in your report. I don't see that in your report. Here, let me put it back up here. I just asked you, I think at the beginning of my cross-examination, everything that you had reviewed in order to come to your conclusion, didn't I?
Yes.
And up here is your report, right?
Yes.
I don't know if let me see if I can. Can you all see it? Yes. Doctor, this is your report, and this is what you relied upon, correct?
Yes.
Yes or no? A nearly complete set of skeletal remains. Yes?
Yes.
A 30 to 40 week gestation based on Dr. Murray's examination, not yours, correct?
38 to 40.
Yep. Female gender, that's based on Miami Valley Crime Lab, right?
Yes.
Reported history from police interview of live birth.
Yes.
Reported scene history of recovery of the remains from the backyard burial. Yes?
Yes.
Reported history from police interview of attempted incineration of the infant. That is what you based your report on, correct?
Yes.
So where does it say up there that you reviewed or based your report on the Hilltop records? Dr. Andrews and Dr. Boyce.
It is not listed on the front page of my report. I did review records that were provided to me and did not have anything from those records to include in my report.
Doctor, are those records in your file?
No, we did not create the records in our office. The records were created in a different medical office. We are not the holder of those records.
So you reviewed them and then sent them somewhere? What? I don't understand.
They are disposed of. They are shredded. They are not a part of our record.
Where'd you get those records from?
I believe the Warren County coroner.
You think that the Dr. Updegrove went and got those records?
I don't recall. I believe that's where I got them.
Did you get those records before or after your report dated September 19th?
Before.
Mm-hmm. Well, in reviewing those records, you saw Dr. Andrews' chart. Chart is another word for record. You saw his chart where he indicated that on April 26th, she had a fundal height. You know what fundal height is, don't you?
Yes.
Where he, Dr. Andrew, measured her at being 32 weeks pregnant.
Yes.
You remember that from the report?
Yes.
Do you also remember from that report that she reported her last menses, her last period, was April 3rd? Remember that?
I don't recall that.
Does what is it?
Menses April 3rd.
Yeah, thank you. This is part of Dr. Is that it?
This is Dr. Andrew.
I just want where. History of present illness, this 18-year-old Caucasian white male whose LMP was on April 3rd, 2017. Remember reading that? Part of the report.
I'm sure I read it.
That come into any of your considerations?
Yes, I considered it, and I read the report.
She already said she's... So, you said you considered it? Is that what I
Yes.
heard you say? Yes?
Yes.
And you know that, oh, by the way, did you talk to Dr. Andrew?
No.
Did you talk to Randy Carter or the prosecutors about Dr. Andrew telling Skylar that she could expect to deliver a baby within 10 weeks?
No.
You're aware that Skylar gave birth to a stillborn on April?
Overruled. Go ahead and continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. On May 7th, correct?
I'm aware that she delivered on May 7th, according to police interview.
In the middle of the night. Do you know, or did you bother to count from April 26th to May 7th? That is only 11 days, correct?
Yes.
And according to all of the anthropologists, forensic anthropologists, that fetus was full term, correct?
Yes, that's what they say.
Yeah. So, would you agree, based on that there may have been some type of growth restriction with Skylar's baby?
I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, in your 10 years of experience, are you aware that having an unexpected delivery at home increases the likelihood of a stillborn? Yes or no?
Yes.
Based on your experience, would you agree that if Annabelle was growth restricted, that it increases the likelihood of a stillbirth? Yes or no?
I do not know that she was growth restricted, but if that is the case, yes.
Thank you. Were you aware, in filling this vacuum that you talked about when Ms. Kraft was talking to you, did you look at Skylar's records regarding her eating disorder?
No.
Would you agree that a person who has an eating disorder, a woman or a child, who has an eating disorder also increases the likelihood of a stillbirth?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you talk or have anybody on your behalf talk to Skylar's mom and dad about the problems they were having with her eating disorder?
No.
Doctor, again, I have to go back to the fact that you're talking about this vacuum. You didn't look at any of those things, but you brought in a forensic anthropologist to help you, right?
Yes.
Did you ask for an opinion from an obstetrician, gynecologist, as to the facts as you knew them then? Did you ask for a consult from an obstetrician?
No.
Didn't think it was important, did you? You didn't think it was important, did you?
It wasn't important in terms of the autopsy.
Autopsy being putting the bones together, you didn't do anything else, did you? Did you? Did you do anything else other than make a skeletal remains for pictures?
I did as much of an autopsy as I could, given what was presented to me.
Well, tell us what you did with those bones. Tell us what you did.
Because I was unable to examine the baby at death, I did what I could with skeletal remains, examining the bones, and then also reviewed the information as provided from the scene and also from the police interview, as well as the anthropologist.
So that's part of the autopsy, is not only the examination, but all this extraneous stuff. Is that correct?
It's part of determining the cause and manner of death.
I didn't ask that. I asked you if the autopsy, as you use that word, does that include more than just examining the remains of Annabelle?
The autopsy is just my exam.
Thank you. Doctor, we now know you didn't get an OB, an obstetrician's consult. But let me ask you this, in reviewing these interrogations, did you think it was kind of strange when Skylar, for the first time, was describing this birth of a stillborn, that her water didn't break? Did that come into your consideration? Yes or no?
I'm unaware of whether or not her water broke.
Yeah, but we're talking about her interview. When she was asked, did your water break? And she said no. Did that come into your thought process at all?
I don't recall that statement.
Of course you do. Did it come into your evaluation when she said in that initial interview that the baby wasn't breathing, that the baby didn't have a heartbeat, that the baby was white? Did that come into your consideration?
Yes, it did.
When a baby isn't breathing and the baby is white, meaning it doesn't have oxygen, and we already talked about the umbilical cord being separated, isn't that a description of a stillbirth? Yes or no?
Yes.
Doctor, when a woman or a girl delivers a baby and they don't feel water breaking or anything like that, might that be some sign of a problem with the amniotic fluid around the baby? Would you agree with that?
That's possible.
And when you don't have sufficient amniotic fluid, would you agree that that can cause problems with the umbilical cord?
It can cause problems.
What about Skylar saying she just got on the toilet and the baby came out pretty easily? Does that tell you anything? Does it tell you that maybe that baby was growth restricted? Yes or no?
No.
Doctor, are you familiar with confirmation bias?
No.
You don't know what that means?
No.
Huh. Well, if I were to tell you that confirmation bias is where you come up with some idea and you only look at the facts that support that idea and ignoring facts that don't support that idea, okay?
Okay.
Would you agree, based on what I just told you confirmation bias is that you ignored a ton of facts that would indicate that this baby was stillborn?
I did not ignore facts.
No?
No.
Huh. You didn't get an OB consult. You didn't pay attention to the fact that Skylar was bleeding on April 3rd. Right? Yes or no?
No, I was not aware of
At
that.
this point, we've
Mr.
asked
Richardson,
him
it
to
does
be-
seem like we have been over this ground once before. Let's
I
move on.
apologize, Judge. They may have 1 second.
Okay.
I have no further question for this witness.
Okay.
You still have water up there, Doctor?
I do.
Okay. I don't want to talk to you about ifs, okay? I want to talk to you about what we actually know in this case. Now, let's clear up a couple housekeeping things. Are you employed by the prosecutor's office?
No.
Are you employed by the Warren County Sheriff's Office?
No.
Are you employed by any police agency?
No.
Are you employed by Montgomery County Coroner's Office?
Yes.
And as part of your employment duties, do you perform autopsies on anybody that comes to your attention that meets the requirement for an autopsy?
Yes.
When you come to court, is that by way of subpoena?
Yes.
Subpoenas issued by the state?
Yes.
Subpoenas issued by the defense?
Yes.
They're all the same.
Yes.
You get a subpoena and you come.
That's right.
If the defense issues you a subpoena in this case, are you coming to court?
Yes.
Ms. Kraft, haven't we also been over this ground as well?
Your Honor, he indicated that she's only here as part of her relationship with the state.
Let's move on.
Mr. Rickers wanted to go through the emails that occurred between yourself and Dr. Murray and Mr. Knippen, correct?
Yes.
You would agree those emails were initiated by Dr. Murray, not yourself.
Yes.
And he wanted to then switch from that over to the emails between Dr. Murray and Mr. Knippen. You were not a part of those emails, correct?
Correct.
And he shows you one sentence out of that email, and it indicates that the state, based on Dr. Murray's changed opinion, was in fact asking for an addendum.
Correct.
We weren't hiding anything. If it is now your opinion that you do not believe that there is evidence to suggest that the bones were burned, I will need you to do an addendum to your report with this additional information so that it can be provided to defense counsel.
Yes, that's what it reads.
That's the entire sentence, correct?
Yes.
And then we, because that addendum was not forthcoming, retained Dr. Latham. So we did go get a second opinion.
Yes.
And you're aware of that.
Yes.
Mr. Ritkers wants to ask you about everybody's opinions. When you come here under subpoena by either side and you are asked to give an opinion, are you giving everybody's opinions, doctor, or are you giving your opinion?
I'm giving my opinion.
You look at everything else, correct?
Yes, I look at everything and I'm taking it into consideration, but ultimately when I'm sitting here, it is my opinion.
You are a forensic pathologist,
Yes.
not a forensic anthropologist.
Correct.
Based on what you are able to do within your area of expertise, were you able to make a determination of pre or post-mortem injury to the skull?
No.
And did you in fact indicate that?
Yes.
Have you ever said anything to the contrary?
No.
Did you take into account, when reaching your opinion in this case, the fractures to the skull?
I took it into account, and my opinion still stands. Whether they are before death or after death, my opinion still stands.
You believe, even if those injuries to that skull are post-mortem, this child still died as a result of homicidal violence?
Correct.
The burn injury, the thermal injury, and I want to make sure, because we keep talking about the baby.
Objection. Did she say burn injury? Is that what you said?
I think she was in the process of rephrasing her.
I apologize.
Go ahead.
I want to be careful because we keep kind of using this global reference. When we are talking about burn injury in the context of your testimony, we are talking about thermal injury to the bones. Would you agree?
Yes.
Because that's all you had were the bones.
Correct.
You had no tissue, no
Correct.
organs, any skin?
No. One piece of fatty tissue that was about 2 inches, about 2 by 2 inches.
From the skeletal remains, all we have left of baby Richardson, in making your determination of homicidal violence, does it ultimately matter to you if her body was burned post-mortem?
No.
And do you have any reason to believe it was burned prior to her death?
I don't have any evidence to show that.
And you're trying to find out what led up to the death, correct?
Correct.
Not what happened after the death.
Correct.
So are you able to reach your opinion and make your determination on cause of death in this case separate and apart from whether or not there was a post-death burning of baby Richardson's body?
Yes.
Mr. Ritkers wants to talk to you about the information that Miss Richardson, an adult, she's there by herself without a parent because she's an adult, provided to her doctor. And he points out she's got bleeding on April 3rd of 2017, correct? You see that?
Her last period.
That's what she reported to her doctor.
Correct.
She's also there requesting birth control, correct?
Yes.
Does it in there, anywhere in there indicate that she's pregnant?
No.
Anywhere in there that she told her doctor, I think I'm pregnant, I'm here for a pregnancy test?
No.
But she's reporting her last period, and if we keep going with that, she's also telling her doctor, I'm having regular periods.
Yes.
So that's the information when she goes to the doctor on April 26th that she chooses to report to her doctor.
Yes, that's what it looks like.
I'm here, I want birth control, I'm having a regular period, I don't want a pelvic exam, and I'm not telling you that I'm pregnant, or that I have reason to believe I'm pregnant.
Correct.
She didn't share any of that information, did she?
Overruled.
Yeah, may we approach for 1 second?
You may.
Doctor, you would agree that looking at the record that the defense presented to you, it indicates that her last menstrual period was April 3rd, 2017, that she was having currently regular menses.
Yes.
The defense then wanted to go through audio portions that were selected out. Just one line about no burning.
Yes.
What fire?
Correct.
I didn't burn her. Statements that she made to the police.
Yes.
You had an opportunity to watch those interviews, correct?
Yes.
And read the transcript.
Yes.
So do you recall in the July 20th interview, either hearing it when you watched the interview or when you reading it when you read the transcript, not pursuant to any questioning by the police, when her father first comes into the room and says, honey, tell us what's going on. The police said, you have to tell us because you're 18. And the first thing she utters to her father is, I tried to cremate the baby.
Yes.
That wasn't pursuant to any question asked by any police officer. That was her voluntary statement provided to her father.
Correct.
You were also asked questions as if they were absolutes, and I'll stick with that interview first, about the cord not being attached.
Correct.
Do you recall in the second interview, Detective Carter saying, was it still attached to the placenta? Do you remember? And Skylar says, no. And Detective Carter says, okay. And then Skylar says, I don't remember. It might have been.
Correct.
Is that a definitive it wasn't attached to anything?
No.
That was her saying, I don't know.
Correct.
So if we don't know, based on her statement, as to whether the cord was or was not attached, can you assume from that that the cord was not attached?
I did not assume that, no.
Likewise, you were asked if her water never broke, Or if there was very little, can you assume that there were issues, again, with the placenta or the amount of amniotic fluid? And I would ask you, I would direct your attention to the first interview, when she's with Lieutenant Fain. And he asks her, have you ever heard of the term when people say their water broke? And Skylar says, yeah, I don't think, I don't know. Did you feel that? I don't know. Is there anything definitive about that indicating that her water never broke?
No.
Or indicating low amniotic fluid?
No.
From either of those statements that there was a cord not attached or water never broke, based on what she actually said, not if she said that, what she actually said, can you assume that that child was stillborn?
No.
In either transcript, because again, I don't want to deal with ifs, I want to deal with what we know. Did you ever read any statement or description from the defendant where she said her daughter burst into flames, quote unquote, burst into flames?
No.
Are you able to make any determination on the amount of burn injury to baby Richardson based on what you had to examine?
No.
Was there any testable evidence that had not been destroyed? Was there
No.
any evidence brought to your lab that could be tested, or is everything that you would have needed to make a determination on the amount of burn injury to that baby destroyed?
Yes. Prior prior to it arriving at our office.
Doctor, Mr. Ritgers started out his questioning of you asking if, based on the skeletal remains, what you had to test on that day, those 2 dates. He said you cannot say if there was any injury prior to death. You recall him saying that to you?
Yes.
Based on what you had left of baby Richardson, you've said undetermined etiology, correct?
Yes.
Based on what you had left of baby Richardson, doctor, can you offer an opinion as to whether or not she was suffocated?
No.
Based on the bones that you have, would there be any evidence of suffocation?
No.
Doctor, based on what we have of baby Richardson, can you make any determination as to whether or not she was drowned?
No.
Would any evidence of drowning still show up on the bones?
No.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Richters, recross? Sure.
Doctor, decomposition occurs when the baby or any human being is buried in the ground. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that's not necessarily a sign of anybody destroying anything. It's a natural process, isn't it? Is decomposition a natural process? Yes,
Yes.
or no? When you first took the stand and were questioned by Ms. Kraft, she made it a point, and you totally agreed, that you can't decide this case or any other case in a vacuum. Correct?
Correct.
And so when she got back up here and talked about everybody else's opinion, wouldn't you think that Dr. Latham, who was hired by the prosecutor, wouldn't you think that that report is very important as to those fractures? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Sure.
And yet it's nowhere in any report of yours, is it? You just want to let it linger for the jury that maybe those fractures occurred sometime before what you think was a death, as opposed to after the baby was buried in the ground, correct? That's what your report says. You don't know before or after.
My report says I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Ms. Kraft, when she came back up here to ask a few other questions of you, and she referred to Dr. Andrew, did you in any way, were you aware that Dr. Andrew came in here and said that when he told Skylar that she was pregnant, that her reaction was one of surprise? Were you told that?
I was not told that.
You know that it was kind of important. No, strike that. I heard you say when Ms. Kraft came back up here that your determination was based on everything that occurred before Annabelle was stillborn on May 7th. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
But you didn't have everything, did you? You did not have everything when you made that consideration. Yes or no?
I'm not sure that I understand your
Okay,
question.
that's fair. That's fair. Well, you didn't get an OB consult, an obstetrician. You didn't ask an OB about what they saw in the medical records, and then you have a full-term baby 11 days later, did you?
I did not talk to her OB or get an OB consult.
And that you didn't think anything of the bleeding that Skylar reported when she first went to the OB on April 26th, did you? Didn't.
No.
And in your review of these interrogations, isn't it true that Skylar was asked multiple times as to whether or not she cut the cord, and she said no? Is that true?
Yes.
May I have 1 second?
Okay.
more things, Dr. Brown. When you were asked some questions by Ms. Kraft about tissues and stuff, there was hair that was found at the scene, correct?
Yes.
And some tissue that you had already talked about, correct?
Yes.
And there wasn't any indication of burning on those pieces of evidence, was there?
No.
And Doctor, you didn't talk, or you weren't aware of any interviews with Skylar's mother regarding finding any bloody Tampax or pads in the upstairs trash. You're not aware of that, are you?
No.
And finding those before the stillborn was born on May 7th, correct? You you don't know anything about that?
I don't. No, I don't.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Eames.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I have seen cross-examinations before, but never have I ever seen an expert get grilled and roasted at the same time under cross-examination. Grilled is one thing, roasted's another, but both at the same time, I've never seen it before until this case. Prosecution is, at this point, is got to scramble to get their case in chief back together. So here's what's gonna happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, my lineup includes anthropologist Krista Latham and maternal fetal medicine specialist Dr. Kim Brady. Now, I'm gonna start a little bit later than what I do because I have an interview scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. So, what I'll likely do is start this thing up about 3:30 in the afternoon, and we'll continue with those two pieces of testimony. But that will be part 5 if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, that'll be my part 5. Yes. Yes, that'll be my 5th installment. So be ready for that. 6:30 in the east, 3:30 in the west, and we will pick up with that testimony. Thank you all so much for joining me. This is BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded, Throwback, Ohio versus Richardson. Ernest Bethea, the last outlaw here. Thank you all so much. You got 6 ways to get in contact with me: Facebook, X, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, email. Let me know what you think, and also drop in some more ideas for cases I can do in the future. I know I have a few of my own, but give me a few of your own, and I'll put them in consideration. All right. Until then, thank you for joining me. We'll do this again tomorrow. Until then, you all know what to do from here. bite this. Hey guys, this is The Last Outlaw saying thank you to all of you who watched this video and subscribe to BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded, your drama-free true crime destination. I couldn't dream of doing this without you, so thank you. Did you enjoy this presentation? Are you looking to get more information on everything presented here? Are you looking to give more feedback on this presentation? Here's what you can do. Like this video. The more eyes on this video, the more this information is spread to others, which brings us a step closer to justice served. Share this video to your social media. Just like dropping a like, the more eyes on this video, the closer we get to justice served. Drop me a comment, whether it's on the topic or the presentation. I am open to all comments, whether it's a theory, a speculation, or a suggestion. I will respond to all. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button to show your support of this little true crime engine powered by you. Set the notification bell to all for future videos. Be sure to follow BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded all over social media. At BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded True Crime on Facebook. At EKB316 on X, formerly known as Twitter. At BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded on YouTube. At EKB316 on Instagram. At King of Hearts 316 2021 on TikTok. You can drop me an email as well. The address is kingofhearts316_09@outlook.com. This is your home for news without the drama, where your opinions matter, for lively debates, where your voice is heard, and above all else, justice served. This is BETHEA'S BYTE, and it's reloaded.